Hey, this is Zeklog the Great. Not long ago, I recorded a video about how society values men and women differently. At the time, I wanted to talk about how this affects the exercise of power. But since, I've realized that there's a lot more to be said about this topic. Feminists like to imagine that society has built-in a cruel bias against women. They come to this conclusion by looking only at the disadvantages women have and ignoring their advantages. Now, it would be easy to err in the other direction, to say that women are just routinely benefited and prioritized over men. But in the real world, things are seldom that simple. The real world involves trade-offs. You want to look and feel good. Great, you can do that, but you can't eat ice cream 3 or 4 nights a week. You want a well-paid, prestigious job. That could happen, but you will probably have to give up a great deal of time with your family. So, let's talk about these trade-offs between men and women. The most obvious of these trade-offs is freedom. In traditional societies, men have many more options in how to manage their lives than women. They are free to travel on their own, free to explore, and even engage in minor misbehavior in a way that is not acceptable for women. It looks as if society is oppressive and cruel towards women, right? But what's the other side of that coin? Women are much, much safer than men in these societies. As I said, men are free to explore. Men are also free to be drafted into the military and sent halfway across the world to kill and be killed for a cause they care nothing about. Men are more free to be lawyers and doctors. Men are also more free to be loggers, miners, fishers, all of which have very serious risks of death and life-altering injury. Don't see feminists talking about gender discrimination in those fields very often, do you? Another important trade-off is that young women start with social status. Even if they don't take them seriously, older men are more than happy to listen to attractive young women. A young woman on YouTube talking about exactly the same ideology as a man will get far more views. Young women have value to the larger society built into their very being. Young men? Hardly. A young man has to prove his worth, has to demonstrate to the rest of the world that he has some value. This is why young men so often engage in flashy, risky behavior. They must shout to the world that they exist, that they matter. No one is particularly interested in their opinions on just about anything. From the time they begin adolescence to the time they demonstrate some kind of expertise, some kind of utility to the rest of the world, young men are tolerated, not celebrated. But there are always trade-offs. And the downside for women is that as they get older, they lose this inherent value. This explains much of the rage of 30-plus post-Wall feminists. Suddenly, no one is interested in what they have to say just because they're attractive young women. Suddenly, to be valued, they must provide something of value to others. Their status drops, and if no one taught them where it came from, they are confused and enraged. Now, In a healthy society, by that time, most of those women are wives and mothers, and although they no longer receive attention and praise from society at large, they have established a place and people who value them immensely. But if they haven't, I suspect it is extremely painful to watch all of your unearned status evaporate over the course of a few years. Finally, here I must start with a disadvantage for women, or rather two disadvantages that combine to put them in an unfortunate position. First, women are physically weaker than men. Yes, there are exceptions, but on average, there is an enormous gap in simple physical capability between men and women. That's why our sports are segregated as they are. Second, women are at risk of being sexually assaulted in a way that men are not under most circumstances. All women, simply by virtue of being women, have something that men want, and some men will seek to take that by force. I am not justifying this in the slightest, simply acknowledging the reality. This means that women must live with a degree of insecurity that most men will never understand. A young woman is, in this respect, always in the position of a man walking through a bad neighborhood with $20 bills hanging out of his pockets. I honestly don't think I can really imagine this feeling. But even here, there is a trade-off. Yes, women are at risk of having their bodily integrity violated. This is because men desire sexual access and some will not wait for it to be granted. At the same time, though, this means women are in possession of something precious and can use it as a bargaining tool. There are more or less healthy versions of this, but the reality is that women can offer sexual access to get what they want from men. This can range all the way from Hollywood's from open prostitution to Hollywood's casting couch to a wife winning an argument with her husband because, well, is it really worth fighting over if it might cost you later that night? Like I said, varying degrees of decency. But women have a negotiating chip that most men simply don't. And this is a trade-off for their sense of security. Do women or men have it easier in life overall? Does one sex get to play on easy mode? Each has their own advantages and difficulties. But if we don't acknowledge this, if we believe in this myth of a pervasive, oppressive patriarchy, then we start warping and damaging our society in an effort to fix something which is a basic feature of our reality. And that's exactly what we've been doing for decades now. God be with you.